Hello everybody, hope you're doing well today. Hopefully you've had a good Thanksgiving, a good time with your family and all that good stuff. Today's episode of Invasion Suck is not going to be quite as off the wall as Invasion Suck 6. Instead, we're going to have an actual discussion. So, I've got a question for you that I've been thinking about a lot myself for a couple months now. Why is it that invasions in Elden Ring feel so skillless? What makes invasions in Elden Ring feel so just hollow of happiness even when you are the one who won? What is it that makes it just such a supremely dissatisfying experience as of the current moment? Well, any one of these things that I'm going to mention is something that has and will have videos made about it, meaning that we're going to be covering broad topics that in and of themselves can have videos made about them or have. That's what I mean to say. Now, the first thing that I would mention is the insane damage of certain weapons and ashes of war that exist in this game. And this is further exacerbated by overleveled phantoms. So the thing is that when you are the invader, the likelihood of you getting absolutely destroyed in a single combo by 2 or 3 people on the enemy team, it's such a high likelihood that you yourself need to run 1-shot or 2-shot strategies to just compensate for the fact that your artillery, your firepower is that of 1 person in comparison to 3. And so what this ends up meaning is that they have the ability to hit you once and kill you off of it, or hit you twice and kill you off of it, and you are forced to run essentially the same thing, because if you run a build where you're just, say, using your favorite weapon, it takes a good, say, like 6 hits to kill someone with, and you don't have an Ash of War that kills someone all that well on its own, then you are going to lose a very large portion of your invasions just because of that alone. Now, granted, I know that that's not like the biggest thing ever, but what I'm saying is that if the time to kill was lower, then it would help alleviate how insanely brain dead it can feel sometimes when all you have to do is hit someone with a Hand of Melania, hit them with a Stormhawk Axe once you've baited them and they're at around, like, say, 60% HP or lower. And going back to the overleveled Phantom point from earlier, it is a huge problem when you are, say, heck, we could even talk about meta level, but for the sake of it, let's say level 80 or below, where you are doing around the same damage as the host, but then there's just one phantom that ends up doing half of your HP bar with a single swing of a greatsword, And the thing about this is that the tendency is that if a phantom is overleveled, they're also really bad at the game. They almost always end up being PvEers. And so it's not that satisfying to kill overleveled phantoms, because the intense disbalance when it comes to the downscaling system makes it to where you're not going to have a remotely balanced fight. And the other part of it being that if you do kill them, it's like you probably just roll caught someone who doesn't know how to just react to attacks you're using over and over, so it's not really satisfying per se. High damage can come from another couple of places too, and that can definitely be the strength of mage spells or incantations. It's definitely not a satisfying experience when you are fighting someone who is using Comet repeatedly, or Star Shower on a really high intelligence, or heck, even Stars of Ruin, even though it's now it's strafable. If they're using Star Shower, you still have to run sideways for like 3 seconds. And if you get hit by it, there's a very good likelihood that it's going to do a ton of damage. there's a certainty it's going to do a lot of damage if they are over leveled. And so, and that's not even to mention dragon casters and overleveled dragon casters. The area of effect that dragon incantations have already just on their own make dragon incantations extremely brain dead, but then add onto that the extremely high damage that can come from someone having a very well optimized dragon build, or they're just over leveled. And yeah, it's just not fun to fight. And if you're the person using it, you're not getting any sense of like, hey, I really achieved something here. You're like, wow, I cheesed somebody, and you may get a laugh out of it because you cheesed somebody with your dragon mage or hitting someone for 1,000 damage with a comet or something like that. But no, generally speaking, ranged stuff just does not take much skill or effort to succeed with. And that's another huge part of it too, what I just mentioned, is the overabundance of different projectiles in this game. Whether you're talking about Ashes of War or a spell, there are so many difficult to dodge, need your full attention, spammable Ashes of War and mage spells that, I mean, realistically, every single type of build has one form or another of a very powerful projectile. Even the most melee-centered builds are going to have stuff like Beast Roar, Thunderbolt, they're going to have Stormblade, etc. Even these are ripe for you to use on your basic strength or dexterity build. You have your Golem Arrow duped Great Bows, you have Jar Cannons. Now granted, Jar Cannon, you know, it has a very long reload, so I mean, once you get hit once, it's kind of hard to get hit again, but the point I'm trying to make is the amount of projectiles that are very significant in their damage and whatnot. Yeah, and if you're running, say, a Faith build, you have Sacred Blade, which is primarily used for its buff. However, if you do a little bit of prediction work, you can absolutely hit people with the projectile bit of Sacred Blade as well, so nothing to fret about there. If you're running Intelligence, you have a plethora of different projectiles, even ones that are not as spells. We have everybody's favorite, which is Moonveil, Moonblade. You have the Death Ritual Spear, which is about as skill intensive as Blasphemous Blade, like what's on screen right now. Yeah, so you have a ton of different Ash of Wars, and that are projectiles, and so you don't even need to be a caster to have things that are very difficult to deal with. And so whether you're the invader killing somebody with these Ashes of War, generally speaking, it's not that rewarding of a feeling because you just started spamming Stormblades from a distance and someone didn't roll the third one and died that way, in which case that's not really showing anything in terms of skill. And then if you're fighting it, essentially all these projectiles turn the game into run sideways ring. Elden run sideways. And yeah, it's not really that intriguing. And the thing is as well is that when it comes to all these projectiles, this is a game where a very significant portion of where you are able to invade people is in open world, okay? And you end up not having hardly any walls or anything like that to protect yourself and have the projectiles hit walls and stuff like that all that much. So fighting mages and projectile Ashes of War and whatnot is a very, very tedious process in the open world because you have so little cover to work with. Now, funny enough, something that has contributed, I think, very big, a very large amount to the skilllessness of this game is 4-player worlds. I know I've already talked about 6-player worlds, but, you know, hey, it's that big of a deal that it's missing from this game. Why does this make such a big deal? Because if the hosts are just playing the game as normal, then usually they're going to run through the game with as many phantoms as they can. So they can stack up a party of 3 people, and then there's 1 slot for an invader. Now, being that you are the one and only invader, this circles back around to the first point where you have to be able to kill things as easily and quickly as possible. And so what you end up with is a situation where you know that you are not going to get back up. The Taunter's Tongue is also very poorly designed, and there's a very good chance that they are not using it, or you may have a particularly crappy host who uses the Taunter's Tongue to get 1 person in the world and then turns it off to make sure that you don't get help. And with that, it forces you to play a certain way unless you just don't care about winning, which is fine. Like, I have low-level characters that I intentionally have unoptimized, but you're going to encounter situations that you quite literally just can do absolutely nothing about if you choose to play like that. Even if you're playing a very good build, there's going to be times where you just spawn in a corner or you teleport to a corner and you're not able to get out of the way of death before your invincibility runs out. Like, stuff like that happens, Another huge reason as to why invasions can feel so much less skillful than perhaps past Souls games is because of the chain castable Ash of Wars and spells. Now, the only one that's coming to my mind immediately in terms of Ashes of War that are chain castable is Stormblade. That's the only one I can think of as of right now. However, there are a pretty significant amount of spells and incantations that are able to be chain casted. Now, the reason that this ends up making it feel like you just have to run sideways for so long is because the quickness with which they are able to cast another instance of Comet, Swift Glintstone Shard, even the basic Glintstone Shard, you will get stunned by those things. The damage will add up if you ignore it. You cannot ignore it, okay? And the fact that it costs so little FP, and the fact that it is able to come out at such a speed means that you get to run sideways. Going back to what I said earlier about projectiles, you get to run sideways and you get to do a lot of it. Now, if you are the invader, you don't usually get to enjoy this aspect of invasions as much in terms of just being able to spam literally any chain castable spell. Like, you can't just get away with chaining the most basic Glintstone Shard. Your damage will not be significant enough, but the host and the enemy team can, because you have to divert your attention between 2 or 3 people. So yes, just that slight thorn in your side is quite difficult to deal with. Quite annoying to deal with, I more so should say. And also, the skillful part of chain casting was taken out of the game about a year ago. Chain casting used to work in a way which was supposedly a bug, where if 2 different spells were chain castable, you could use one that was chain castable, and then actually chain cast it into a different spell. Now, there were some obvious uses that were not very skill intensive, say like Bestial Sling into Thunderbolt, or Honed Bolt, I guess it's called. However, it brought a lot of viability and interesting concepts to slower spells and whatnot. It did a lot of really cool things in that realm. However, now that that's gone, if you're chain casting, you're not doing anything interesting. You're just pressing the same skill, the same spell over and over. So it really does, it doesn't say anything to your skill level. It just dumbs it down, if anything. Now, I would say that all of these different things have culminated in a realm where you need an over-reliance on Endure, and I think that this also perhaps goes to make the skill disparity quite an unsatisfying thing to look at, because while Endure does have skillful things about it, like keeping track of the timing in which you've used your Endure, because unlike Dark Souls 3, you cannot just use Endure over and over, or it was called Perseverance in Dark Souls 3. You couldn't just spam it over and over and essentially stay invulnerable forever. If you use it again while you still have the Endear effect, it will not refresh the timer. That, even though I've been calling that a bug, it's actually a blessing in disguise now that I think about it more, because if you were able to just spam it and get infinite endurability, or endure, that actually would be very, very brain dead. It'd be significantly more brain dead than it is. And don't get me wrong, I'm very thankful for Endear. It's the saving grace of invaders in this game. But the ability of Endear to be used in other situations, say like just someone running at you with bleed fists and they just Endear in your face and run at you over and over, it's kind of like just one aspect of Endear, but it is a pretty unfun one. And having to use something that literally makes you unable to be staggered, the fact that the over-reliance on that is so high goes to show how unbalanced the other things are. Now, to wrap things up, we gotta ask the question, are these things even remediable? And I honestly don't know if they are, because, I mean, chain casting kind of just is what it is. Ashes of War just kind of exist how they are. This is literally the basis of how they have designed them. The only thing I can think of in terms of trying to make the projectile issue a little bit more manageable is if when you spam a Ash of War over and over, if it, say, either has a cooldown between uses, or if the damage, say, in quotations, stales. If you guys have played Smash Brothers, you know what I'm referring to. If you spam the same move over and over, it will get continuously weaker to a certain point in Smash Brothers. So if there was something like that similar for projectiles, that potentially could help alleviate the brain deadedness of just spamming something over and over. Over-leveled phantoms are going to need a complete overhaul to whatever the non-functional equation is that the game runs to scale someone down. In its current state, it feels like it does absolutely nothing. Funny enough, apparently a glitch that was in the game for a long time is that when you would use the bloody finger to teleport, it would just deactivate the downscaling thing, but no one knew because of how powerful they were in the first place, which is pretty funny. But give your ideas down below. Let's see if we can't think of some ways to make the brain deadedness a little bit less bad in this game. Well, with that being said, have a good day, you guys. Peace out. Bye.